The sun rose cold on Dark Bay, Newfoundland, like the glimmer in a child's eye when he or she first realized it was Christmas morning. It was a particularly cold autumn morning, and dew still clung to the trees and grass, as there had been a frost the past night. It was Friday, a day in Dark Bay like any other. Farmers were putting out their vegetables, the last of their quarry before winter set her cold, merciless hand down on the small inland town. Shops were starting to open up. Children and teens alike were preparing for another day at the only school in the town, Clara Beth Memorial Schoolhouse. Father Francis Brown had awoken early this morning. He didn't know quite why, but the obscure silence had driven him from his warm, comforting bed out onto the cold hardwood floor of his aging but beautiful middle-class home. The house was built some time ago after a fire had ravished the original church and priest's house of Dark Bay. The priest began his morning ritual of prayer before breakfast, coffee, and a cigarette, shower, then to wake his son up for school. During breakfast, Father Brown thought of usually only one thing: how he and his estranged wife would laugh and make conversation about sweet nothings, chewing over the weather, discussing their son or daughter's grades, how silly George Barry had acted in church the past Sunday. But this morning, of course, he was alone. The refrigerator was the only noise in his home, and this feeling, among a couple of others, was the worst and most self-loathing, lonesome feelings a man could ever wish not to feel. He finished his breakfast of 2 eggs, a piece of toast, bacon, and half an orange, only to hear the rustle and bustle of his 10-year-old son's footsteps above him. This agitated the priest, because he had promised his son he had quit the bad habit of smoking, which his boy had coined devil sticks. Francis sighed and began cleaning off the remnants of his morning meal. Just as he finished, Joseph Brown's head popped around the corner of the fridge. He looked distressed. "Dad," he sobbed, "I had a really bad dream." Francis took his son into his arms and said, "What about, son?" "It wasn't another one of those silly clown dreams, was it?" "No, this one was different, Dad. It was terrible. I was trapped in a glass room with tons of people around. I couldn't breathe, and I kept screaming for help, but nobody would help me." "Son, you know it was just a dream. We've had this conversation before. Dreams can't hurt you. They just play tricks on your mind, make you scared when there's really nothing at all to be frightened of." Joseph looked at his dad and smiled. "You're right, Dad. It was just creepy is all." Francis glanced at the clock. 10 after 8. "Joseph, you're going to be late. Hurry up and get ready and I'll take you to school." Joseph was ready fairly quick, while Francis fumbled for his keys. He found them strangely on the floor of his study. He had been reading last night, and maybe when he hit his toe on his desk, he had knocked the keys onto the floor. It didn't matter. He ran through the house and out the back door to find his son waiting in the car, an aging Oldsmobile, gold in color, with little rust spots on the bottom. His wife had taken the Mustang. He cursed this every day. The priest and his son pulled out from the driveway in front of the church and onto Radnor Street, passing by William Dunphy's shop and the small hospital where Joseph was born. The town of Dark Bay looked strange this morning. Low-lying fog had completely blanketed the town with a thick haze. Cars were only visible from 3 meters away, but the strangest part of all was the fact that this fog had only rolled up since the boy had told his father of his nightmare. The sky had been clear when Francis had woken up. "I'm going nuts," thought Francis, as he pulled into Clara Beth, and he laughed in spite of himself. "Have a good day at school, son," he said, as Joseph climbed out of the vehicle. "I will, Dad," he said, and shut the door. Francis pulled out from the small school and began thinking again. He thought of his wife, Beth, continuously. Little things like songs on the radio, places they went together. When someone would say one of her words, he would think of her. Even if the word was commonplace in the dictionary of the standard human dialect of Dark Bay. Francis was now in an almost REM of conscious deep thought, so much that he almost forgot to stop into Dunphy's shop. The church needed new light bulbs before Sunday's service, a lot of them. He pulled in onto the side of Radnor Street and parked directly behind William Dunphy's old Chevrolet truck, an old steel model that was made before car companies got cheap and started using cheap plastic body parts. His door creaked open and was almost taken off by a group of wild teens skipping school. To be young again, he thought. He crossed the street and into Dunphy's shop. Sam Lang was the first person he noticed, looking at entertainment and television magazines, of course. "Hello, Sam. How's Samantha doing?" "She's doing great, Preachy. How about that boy of yours? I seen you bringing him to school just now." "Yeah, he's doing just fine." Francis thought about continuing the conversation and telling Sam about Joseph's nightmare, but thought better of it, due to the fact Sam Lang probably had the IQ of a 4-year-old that fell off the swing set too many times. "That's good to hear there, Preachy. Now, if you don't mind, I gotta get back to reading this here magazine before old man Dunphy has a shit fit and tells me this ain't a library. Like I don't already know that, huh, Preachy?" "Yeah, hope to see you in church Sunday, Sam." Sam nodded the priest off without a good day, of course. Francis walked down the thin aisle toward the hardware section at the back of the store. He found himself sweating now despite the bitter cold of the day outside. He picked up 10 boxes of Globe brand light bulbs, 40 watt, and continued to the checkout. William was there, smoking a cigarette, and the priest remembered in his hurry to get Joseph to school he had forgotten his at home. This instantly devised the classic scheme of bumming a cigarette. "Hello, Mr. Dunphy," he said, holding back his insatiable urge to bellow for his beloved devil sticks. "Well, hello there, Father Brown. How are you on this glorious day of our Lord?" "All's well and good will." Francis was a preacher, but he sometimes thought that William Dunphy took his faith a little bit too far. "Will this be all for you today?" "Yes, sir, indeed it will." "That'll be $28.95. Oh, and I might say, last week's sermon was lovely. Except for one part," he said, as he doubted his cigarette. "Oh, and what part was that?" Will never spoke badly, or so abruptly about anything. This came as a major shock. "Well, it wasn't the sermon, Father. It was what my youngest learned in Sunday school. He came home and asked what Satan and hell were. Yes? That's all a part of that. Children must learn if they are to fully understand their faith." "No!" screamed Will. "Now you listen here. You can't go corrupting our children's minds with that stuff." Now Francis really thought it was too far. Okay. I'll ask Mrs. Winthrop to not concentrate so hard on those particular topics." Instantly, the huge vein forming on Will's neck was gone, and he agreed politely, "Thanks, Francis." By now, obviously the father had completely reconsidered asking for a cigarette. He bid Mr. Dunphy farewell and nodded to Sam Lang on the way out. "That was so bizarre," he said out loud. "Mr. Dunphy is such a calm man. What could have set him off like that? Certainly not strictly the idea of Sunday school teaching the kids of evil."